For years, you were made to believe that your love story simply fell apart. You were told the timing was wrong, the feelings had changed, and your soulmate had chosen a different future. But a hidden DNA result has just shattered that entire story. Because the person who kept the two of you apart was never a stranger. They were standing much closer than anyone imagined. And what your soulmate discovered beside your name has left them questioning every decision they made without you. Listen carefully, because this truth did not surface by accident. Someone had spent years making sure this DNA result stayed buried, locked away where your soulmate would never think to search. The report was connected to an old family matter, something everyone had been told was settled long ago. But recently, while searching through documents that were never supposed to be opened again, your soulmate noticed something strange. There were two versions of the same file. One had been shown to the family years ago. The other had been hidden inside a sealed envelope with instructions that it should never be discussed. At first, your soulmate almost put it back. They had no reason to believe this old paperwork had anything to do with you. But then they saw a date. A date from the exact period when your relationship suddenly began falling apart. And underneath that date was the name of someone who had once claimed they were only trying to protect your soulmate. That single detail was enough to make them open the envelope. What they found inside changed the meaning of everything. The DNA result itself was important, but the handwritten note attached to it was even more disturbing. It suggested that somebody had known the truth before your soulmate was ever told the story that pushed them away from you. Someone had deliberately used incomplete information, twisted conversations, and carefully chosen lies to create fear inside your soulmate's mind. They were made to believe that staying connected to you would cause a family disaster. They were warned that choosing you would destroy relationships they had spent their entire life protecting. And your soulmate believed them. That is the part that hurts them now. Because looking back, they can finally see how perfectly everything was timed. Whenever they became closer to you, another warning appeared. Whenever they began talking seriously about a future with you, someone created another emergency. Whenever they questioned what they were being told, they were shown proof that seemed impossible to argue with. But that proof was never the whole truth. Your soulmate remembers the day their behavior toward you changed. You probably remember it too. One moment there was warmth, hope, and a feeling that something real was being built between you. Then suddenly there was distance. Their messages changed. Their voice became guarded. Questions they once answered openly were avoided. They began carrying a weight they never explained. You may have wondered what you did wrong. Now your soulmate knows you may not have done anything wrong at all. Someone else had entered the space between you. And they did it carefully enough that neither of you could see their fingerprints. The hidden DNA result revealed that one of the biggest claims used to separate you had been manipulated. Not necessarily by changing every piece of evidence, but by hiding the one piece that would have changed your soulmate's decision. The person responsible knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that if your soulmate saw the complete result, the fear surrounding your relationship would collapse. So they removed the truth and allowed the lie to become stronger. Years passed. Your soulmate tried to move forward. They told themselves that losing you had been necessary. They repeated the explanations they had been given until those explanations almost felt like their own beliefs. But somewhere deep inside, something never made sense. That is why your name never completely disappeared from their thoughts. That is why certain memories still hit harder than they should. And that is why, when this hidden result appeared, their first thought was not about the family. It was about you. They sat there staring at the paper, remembering conversations they had once judged completely differently. Suddenly your reactions made sense. Your confusion made sense. Even some of the arguments between you looked different now. You had been defending yourself against accusations you did not even know existed. And your soulmate had been reacting to a story you had never been allowed to hear. That realization broke something inside them. Because they started asking the question they had avoided for years. What if the person I walked away from was actually telling me the truth? They could not stop there. They began comparing dates, old messages, family conversations, and documents that had once seemed unrelated. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The same person appeared again and again at every major turning point. Before the separation. After the argument. During the family pressure. Even when your soulmate considered contacting you again, this person somehow stepped in with another reason why reopening the connection would be a terrible mistake. That was when your soulmate realized this had never been one misunderstanding. It had been a campaign. Someone wanted you removed from their future. But the biggest shock was still waiting. Because hidden behind the DNA report was another page. Your soulmate nearly missed it because it had been folded underneath the original document. On that page was a signature they recognized immediately. Their hands started shaking. This was not the signature of an outsider. It belonged to someone your soulmate had trusted with some of the most important decisions of their life. Someone who had comforted them after losing you. Someone who had watched them suffer and never admitted what they knew. And beside that signature was a short written instruction proving that the complete DNA result had been intentionally kept from your soulmate before the two of you separated. Your soulmate read the sentence again. Then again. And suddenly they understood why this person had always looked uncomfortable whenever your name was mentioned. They knew. They had always known. But when your soulmate confronted them, something even more disturbing happened. The person did not deny hiding the result. Instead, they looked directly at your soulmate and said, "You still don't know the real reason I had to keep the two of you apart." And what they revealed next was far bigger than the DNA result itself. The room went completely silent after those words. Your soulmate had expected an excuse, maybe even an apology, but not another secret. The person standing in front of them looked frightened now, almost as if the truth they had protected for years was finally too heavy to carry. Your soulmate demanded an explanation, and this time they were not willing to accept half-truths. They wanted to know exactly why you had been pushed out of their life, why the DNA result had been hidden, and why someone they trusted had watched them spend years believing a lie. For several seconds, the person said nothing. Then they admitted something your soulmate never expected to hear. The DNA result had not originally been hidden because of what it revealed. It had been hidden because of what it would have forced the family to reveal next. There was an older secret connected to the result, something that could have exposed years of deception inside the family. And when you entered your soulmate's life, certain people became afraid that your presence would eventually bring that secret into the open. That was why the pressure against you became so intense. It was never simply because they disliked you. They were afraid of what would happen if you stayed. Your soulmate suddenly remembered how strange certain family members had acted around you. Some were polite on the surface but cold underneath. Others asked questions that seemed innocent at the time but now felt calculated. They wanted to know how serious the relationship was, what your future plans were, whether marriage had been discussed, and whether you knew anything about certain family matters. At the time, your soulmate thought they were simply being protective. Now they understood. They were measuring how dangerous your presence had become. The person finally admitted that once the family realized your relationship was becoming serious, a decision had been made behind closed doors. You and your soulmate had to be separated before either of you asked the wrong questions. They believed that if your soulmate married you, old documents, medical records, and family history might eventually come under scrutiny. And if that happened, the hidden DNA result would only be the beginning. So they created a story. Not one giant lie that could easily be exposed, but dozens of smaller ones. A comment taken out of context. A message delivered incorrectly. A conversation exaggerated. A warning presented as concern. A rumor repeated until it sounded believable. And every time your soulmate started doubting the story, someone they trusted stepped forward to reinforce it. That is why the separation felt so confusing. There was never one clear moment when everything ended. Instead, trust was slowly poisoned. Your soulmate was encouraged to question your intentions. They were told you wanted something from them. They were warned that you would eventually leave. They were shown carefully selected details that appeared to prove you were hiding something. And because these warnings came from people your soulmate had trusted for years, your soulmate began questioning the person they should have been speaking to directly. You. Now that realization is destroying them. Because they remember moments when you tried to explain yourself and they refused to listen. They remember when you asked what had changed and they could not give you a real answer. They remember becoming colder toward you while secretly hoping you would somehow understand what they themselves could not explain. And the worst memory came next. Your soulmate suddenly remembered one particular conversation shortly before the final separation. You had asked them a simple question. Who are you believing right now, me, or everyone speaking for me? At the time, your soulmate became defensive. Now those words feel completely different. Because the answer had been everyone except you. The person confessing finally lowered their head and admitted that they had personally delivered one of the most damaging lies. They had told your soulmate that you knew about the DNA issue and were deliberately hiding information. That accusation changed everything. Your soulmate began believing that your silence on something you knew nothing about was proof of betrayal. But you never knew. You were being punished for a secret that had been hidden from you too. Your soulmate stepped backward as if the truth had physically struck them. Years of resentment suddenly had nowhere to go. Anger they had carried toward you began turning toward the people who had created it. They asked how anyone could justify doing something like this. The answer was chilling. We thought separating you was the safest way to protect everyone. Protect everyone. Except you. Except your soulmate. Except the love that was destroyed in the process. Your soulmate demanded to know who had made the final decision. They wanted the name of the person who had said that you had to be removed permanently. At first, the person refused. They said too many lives could still be affected. They warned your soulmate that reopening the past could create consequences no one was prepared for. But your soulmate was done being controlled by fear. They said they had already lost years because other people decided what truth they were allowed to know. They were not going to surrender another day. That was when the person finally opened a locked drawer. Inside was a thin folder your soulmate had never seen before. It contained copies of old messages, handwritten notes, medical paperwork, and one document marked with a date your soulmate immediately recognized. The exact day your relationship with them truly collapsed. Your soulmate opened it. At the top of the page was a short summary of the plan that had been discussed inside the family. It described how communication between you should be limited, how certain information should reach your soulmate, and how they should be discouraged from contacting you directly. This was not an emotional family argument. It was organized. Someone had planned the distance between you. And then your soulmate reached the bottom of the page. There was one line identifying who had approved everything. They froze. Because the name did not belong to the person confessing. It belonged to someone your soulmate had defended every single time you questioned the family. Someone your soulmate believed would never betray them. Someone who had repeatedly said they only wanted your soulmate to be happy. Your soulmate stared at the name until their eyes filled with tears. Then they whispered. They knew I loved them. The person beside them answered quietly. Yes, your soulmate looked up. And they still did this? Another pause. Yes. But before your soulmate could say another word, the person pulled one final envelope from the folder and placed it on the table. This is what you need to see before you confront them. Your soulmate opened it. Inside was an old letter. A letter written years ago. And the handwriting belonged to you. Your soulmate had never seen it. You had apparently written it shortly before the separation, explaining something that could have prevented everything. But someone intercepted it. Someone kept your words hidden for years. And when your soulmate turned the letter over, they found a handwritten note on the back from the person who had taken it. Only 6 words were written there. 6 words that made your soulmate realize the separation had been planned even earlier than they thought. And once they understood what those words meant, they immediately reached for their phone. Because after all these years, they were finally ready to contact you. But just before they could make the call, the door behind them opened. And the person whose name was written at the bottom of that secret plan walked into the room. The moment that person stepped into the room, your soulmate's entire body went still. There was no confusion anymore. No missing piece. No room left for excuses. The signature on the secret plan, the intercepted letter, the hidden DNA result, the years of pressure, it all pointed back to the person now standing only a few feet away. For years, your soulmate had trusted them completely. They had defended them when others questioned their intentions. They had believed their advice during some of the hardest moments of their life. And when your relationship ended, this was the same person who had sat beside your soulmate and said, "Maybe it was meant to happen this way." Now your soulmate understood why those words had always felt so cold. The person looked at the open folder on the table, then at the letter in your soulmate's hand. Their face changed immediately. They knew the secret was over. Your soulmate did not shout at first. That was what made the moment even heavier. They simply held up your old letter and asked one question. "How long did you know?" The person tried to avoid eye contact. Your soulmate asked again. "How long did you know that everything I believed about them was wrong?" There was a long silence. Then came the answer. "From the beginning." Those 3 words broke whatever restraint your soulmate had left. Because this was no longer about one hidden report. It was about years stolen from both of you. Birthdays you never shared. Conversations that never happened. Plans that were abandoned. Nights when both of you probably wondered whether the other had stopped caring. And all along, someone knew the truth. Your soulmate slammed the letter onto the table and demanded to know why. The person finally admitted that when you became important to your soulmate, they panicked. Your relationship was becoming too serious, too quickly. You were asking questions. Your soulmate was beginning to think independently. And most dangerously, the 2 of you were talking about building a future where certain family secrets could no longer remain hidden. The DNA result was one of those secrets. But not the only one. The person admitted that the family had spent years protecting an old decision, one that could have changed how your soulmate viewed several people they loved and respected. If the full truth came out, relationships could collapse, reputations could be damaged, and questions would be asked about decisions made long before you ever entered the picture. They believed you were the person most likely to expose it. Not because you were trying to destroy anyone, but because you refused to accept explanations that did not make sense. You noticed inconsistencies. You asked why dates did not match. You questioned why certain family stories changed depending on who told them. And that made you dangerous to people who needed silence. So they turned your soulmate against you before you could get close enough to uncover the truth. Your soulmate listened with tears in their eyes. Then they asked something the person was clearly hoping they would never ask. Did they ever try to come back? The room became quiet again. The person did not answer. That silence was enough. Your soulmate stepped closer. Did they try to contact me after we separated? Finally, the person nodded. Once. Then again. And the truth became even more painful. You had tried more than once. There had been messages, letters, at least one phone call. And every attempt had been blocked, intercepted, deleted, or explained away before it reached your soulmate. The person confessed that one message from you had arrived only weeks after the separation. You had not been angry. You had not begged. You had simply said that if your soulmate ever wanted the full truth, you would be ready to explain everything face to face. Your soulmate never saw it. Another message arrived months later. You had written that you still did not understand what had happened, but you hoped your soulmate was safe and happy. That message disappeared too. Then there was the letter now sitting on the table. The letter that could have changed everything. Your soulmate picked it up again, but this time they began reading every word slowly. In it, you had explained that you knew something was happening behind the scenes. You said people were speaking about you without allowing you into the conversation. You said you could feel your soulmate pulling away, but you refused to fight rumors you were never allowed to hear. Then came the line that shattered them. You had written that if your soulmate truly wanted to leave, you would respect the decision, but if someone else was making that decision for them, you hoped they would discover the truth one day. Your soulmate could barely continue reading. Because you had known. Not the details. Not the DNA secret. But you had known your love story was being manipulated. And nobody believed you. The person who had hidden the letter finally said they had convinced themselves they were protecting your soulmate. They believed that eventually your soulmate would forget you, move on, and build a simpler life. But that never happened. Your soulmate asked whether they knew that too. The person looked away. Yes. They knew your soulmate still thought about you. They knew your name still came up. They knew certain songs, places, anniversaries, and memories still changed your soulmate's mood. And instead of telling the truth, they allowed your soulmate to believe those feelings were weakness. That confession changed something. Your soulmate stopped crying. The sadness turned into determination. They closed the folder and said they wanted everything. Every letter. Every message. Every document. Every piece of evidence connected to the DNA result. No more missing pages. No more family versions. No more, we did it for your own good. The person hesitated. That was when your soulmate realized there was still something being hidden. They asked directly, "What else is there?" The person said nothing. Your soulmate looked toward the locked drawer. Then they noticed something they had missed before. Behind the drawer was another envelope. Different from the rest. Newer. Your soulmate pulled it out. On the front was their name. And underneath it were 4 words. Only if truth surfaces. Inside was a second DNA report. Not a copy. A completely different test. Your soulmate compared the dates. The first hidden DNA result had been taken years ago. This one had been completed much more recently. Someone had ordered another test without telling them. And when your soulmate read the conclusion, their face lost all color. Because this result proved that the original family secret was even bigger than anyone had admitted. It also explained why someone had become desperate to keep you away. Your soulmate looked at the person across the room and asked, "Who ordered this second test?" The answer came slowly. The person named someone your soulmate had not suspected once. Someone who had quietly watched the entire situation from the background. Someone who had recently tried to find you. Your soulmate immediately demanded their phone number. They called. The person answered after only 2 rings. There was no greeting. No surprise. They simply said, "I knew this day would come." Your soulmate asked what the second DNA result really meant. A long pause followed. Then the voice on the other end said something that made everyone in the room freeze. The DNA result was never the biggest secret. Your soulmate tightened their grip on the phone. What could possibly be bigger? The voice answered. The reason they separated you from you was not only to protect the family. Your soulmate's heart began pounding. Then why? Another pause. Because someone believed that if the 2 of you stayed together, you would eventually discover who your soulmate really was connected to. Your soulmate stared at the second report. Then the voice added one final sentence. And the person who knows the entire truth has been trying to reach you before the family finds out. Your soulmate immediately asked for a name. This time, the answer left them completely speechless. Because the person holding the final truth was someone both of you had believed disappeared from this story years ago. And according to the voice on the phone, they were already on their way to meet you.